The war in the north has begun, as large barrages of Hezbollah rockets have been fired deep into Israel, and the IDF is increasing its own strikes on Hezbollah positions all over Lebanon. This follows the assassination of some of Hezbollah's most senior Radwan Force field commanders in an airstrike on a Radwan Force commanders meeting in the heart of Beirut's Tahrir neighborhood. 16 other senior Hezbollah operatives were also eliminated in this strike, according to the IDF assessment. In response to the latest attacks, Hezbollah opened unprecedented fire on the north of Israel. They say their target was the Air Force base in Ramat David, but most of their rockets hit civilian areas, including a barn filled with cows in Bet She'arim in the lower Galilee. In response, the IDF is changing the directives of the Home Front Command from Haifa and north, preparing for a large attack by Hezbollah. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, the Air Force attacked about 20 terror targets in the last 24 hours. Elsewhere, in the Palestinian enclave of Gaza, Hamas terrorists looted aid trucks and briefly escaped before being eliminated from the air. Fire was also directed at Israel from the direction of Iraq in the last 24 hours, with a number of suspicious aerial targets intercepted before they crossed into Israel. It's been a very busy weekend, but the new week is just getting started, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 352nd day of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, which is the head of the axis of evil, and all the terror proxies in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. Before we get started, please take a moment and click on the subscribe button so that you will never miss an episode of Boots on the Ground. On Friday, the IDF carried out an unprecedented operation in broad daylight to take down several of the most dangerous terrorists threatening the Jewish state. Al Jazeera reported that 4 missiles were fired at a building in Beirut, in Lebanon, where a meeting was taking place between over 20 senior Hezbollah commanders. According to reports in the Lebanese media portals, at least 16 of these terrorists were eliminated in the strike, and it can be assumed that the others were wounded. Photos came from the scene showing heavy damage to the structure that was attacked, as well as to many dozens of cars in the vicinity. In response to criticism regarding the harm to civilians during these eliminations, senior IDF official spokesman Daniel Agari said they gathered underground under a residential building in the heart of the Tahrir neighborhood while using civilians as human shields. They are the commanders who conceived and led the plan of the terrorist organization Hezbollah to carry out the attack in the north on the Day of Order that they called the Plan to Occupy the Galilee. In a statement delivered in front of cameras this evening, IDF spokesman Hagari emphasized that for the time being there is no change in the directives of the Home Front Command, but added that the IDF is on high alert and that the public will be informed immediately if anything changes. He called on the citizens of Israel to continue to show vigilance and alertness. We are in a tense period. The IDF is fighting in several areas, and our enemies will try to challenge us. In a statement in which the IDF confirmed that Radwan Force Commander Ibrahim Akil had been amongst those eliminated in the strike, the IDF added that he and those he was meeting with were amongst the architects of the plan for the conquest of the Galilee, and that Akil had been the head of Hezbollah's operations since 2004, and that as part of this, he was responsible for Hezbollah's activities in the areas of sabotage attacks, anti-tank fire, explosive charges, air defense, and other military aspects. It was generally known that Akil was considered the top candidate to be the next Hezbollah chief of staff, even before the assassination in July of Faoud Shukar. But this evil man had a career in terrorism for decades before this war started. He joined Hezbollah in the early 1980s and was wanted by the United States for his role in the attacks on the US Embassy and the Marine barracks in Beirut in 1983, as well has a long list of other attacks against United States citizens and interests in the region, as well as citizens of Germany, France, and Lebanon itself. The United States even put a $7 million reward for information that would lead to the capture of Akil. But they can keep that money to themselves because Akil is now out of the picture, and so are most of Hezbollah's senior military leadership. Israel has systematically eliminated these evil men in one strike after another since Hezbollah joined this war, uninvited, by firing rockets into northern Israel on October 8, 2023. It is important to note that Hezbollah is not just a terrorist army. They have many middle management positions filled by people who have little or no military knowledge or experience, but instead are involved in running indoctrination programs for children and distribution networks for food, medicine, and other things that ordinary people in the Shiite community depend on. Hezbollah is a central pillar of Lebanese society and has infiltrated itself into many different organs of the Lebanese state, including the government. It is therefore very difficult to separate it from the rest of the Lebanese society and to attack only Hezbollah and not hit anyone or anything else. However, this strike on a meeting of senior Radwan force commanders was an example of how it can sometimes be done. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on developments in this situation going forward. Please help us by sharing our videos on YouTube, subscribing to this YouTube channel, and following us on social media. You can also stay up to date by visiting our website, tbnisrael.com/news, or look for us on TBN Israel's social media networks so that you will never miss an update of what is happening in Israel. The IDF has taken the unusual step of changing the directives of the Home Front Command from Haifa and northward. Preparing for a large-scale Hezbollah attack, IDF spokesman Brigadier General Daniel Hagari announced that these areas are moving to a level 2 defense policy. Educational activities and work will only be held near protected areas, and public gatherings are limited to 30 people or less. The IDF spokesman added, "It is possible that rockets and other threats will be launched into the country in the near future." Indeed, shortly before 5 a.m., alarms sounded in several northern communities signifying the beginning of the bombardment. It lasted for over an hour, coming in 4 waves. Although most of the incoming weapons were intercepted, explosions were heard in Akko, Haifa, and Kiryat Shmona, as well as Natzrat. In total, 4 waves of attacks came with over 110 rockets fired into the Jezreel Valley region. The El Mayadin Network, a Lebanese media portal that is close to Hezbollah, reported that the target of these attacks was the Ramat David Air Base, as well as the production facilities of defense company Rafael, which specializes in the kind of electronic warfare equipment used in the pager attack last week. According to their report, the missiles that were launched were Model Fadi-1 with a diameter of 220 millimeters and a range of 80 kilometers, and Fadi-2 with a diameter of 302 millimeters and a range of 105 kilometers. Several fires broke out and a boy was killed. 4 others were injured in a car accident when they were trying to find safety during the barrage, while there were injuries reported on other areas from Sharpano and Shock. In the midst of all this kinetic activity, the first responders of Magen David Adom are always amongst the first to arrive on any scene of carnage and destruction. Magen David Adom is the largest organization in Israel for medical first responders. It has over 35,000 volunteers and hundreds of ambulances and medicycles, which allow them to take care of those wounded in rocket attacks, terrorism, accidents, and natural disasters. They are on the front lines saving lives every single day of the year. But in situations like this, they have even more work to do, and war or no war, they rely entirely on donations for all their activities. They are not funded by the government. If you would like to be a blessing to Israel in this time of crisis, Magen David Adom is a great place to send your donations. You can donate on their website at www.savelifeisrael.com. Now let's get back into the news. Switching our focus to the Gaza Strip, the IDF continues regular and consistent fighting directed by the intelligence information of the Amman and the Southern Command. Mohammed Mansour, who was a significant actor in the Hamas effort to acquire and use technological knowledge from military intelligence and combat applications, was eliminated by the IDF over the weekend, along with dozens of other Hamas terrorists. The combat teams of the Givati and the Nahal combat brigades, along with the 5th and 14th brigades, were busy over the weekend discovering and capturing large stocks of weapons and ammunition, as well as engaging with terrorists who are increasingly desperate as their numbers fall down and their supplies run out. The spokesman for the IDF, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, announced Saturday evening that the day after the murder of the abductees, a force from Division 162 identified the 2 terrorists who came out of an underground shaft near the area of the Tel El Sultan refugee camp in Rafah and eliminated them during the encounter. After we investigated the findings from the tunnel and the equipment that was on the terrorists, we found DNA findings and a number of items that belonged to the terrorists who were eliminated. The same terrorists we eliminated were on the route where the bodies of the 6 abductees were found when they were murdered. We are investigating their involvement in the murder. The IDF spokesman went on to say, "We will pursue and get to everyone who committed this heinous murder. We will not stop until we get everyone. We continue to fight for the dismantling of the military arm of Hamas. For a moment, we do not forget our hostages, and we make every effort to return them home." Meanwhile, the forces of the Givati Brigade have been operating in the Rafah region for the past few weeks under the command of Division 162. Over the weekend, they observed an attempt by armed men to hijack a truck carrying humanitarian aid meant for the civilian population of Gaza. The IDF forces broke up the attempted hijacking and eliminated the armed looters. Elsewhere, Air Force jets hit a Hamas command and control position set up inside buildings that were formerly part of the El Falah school in Gaza City. Please continue to spread the truth, share, and follow us. Take a minute to press the subscribe button, and more than that, support us. Give a hand to the truth. If you want to donate so that we can create more videos like this one, please go to our website at tbnisrael.com/give. This is the best way you could help us continue to produce up-to-date and detailed quality content about what is happening in Israel. I will now turn the broadcast over to our very own Mati Shoshani that will summarize the weekend for us with a general picture of what is happening in the Middle East.
Thanks, Yair. Now let's dive into the details. In recent days, Israel has managed to surprise itself, Iran, and even Hezbollah, and in the whole process, astonish the world. Nasrallah's advisors are dwindling every hour, and Iran realizes that they have entered into a serious problem. The rules of the game are changing. And however, Iran is known for its ability to play the long game, to be patient and long-suffering in pursuit of its strategic objectives. This includes exporting the Islamic Revolution, building nuclear weapons, and much else. This strategic patience can be seen in the way it has built up its terrorist proxies in Lebanon, Yemen, and elsewhere. For most of the past year, Iran has been closing in on Israel, activating the forces it built up in an encircling maneuver around the Jewish state. After the Hamas attack on October 7th, it activated all its fronts against Israel, the main one being Hezbollah in Lebanon. But this time, it was Israel that acted patiently, not rushing into Lebanon with guns blazing as soon as Hezbollah began firing at us, but taking the time to soften up Hezbollah with regular assassinations of senior leaders and strikes on rocket launchers, ammunition depots, and command and control nodes. Now, Iran's bills are coming due, and Israel is spreading out the payment over time. It will also be charging interest, as is customary in the Middle Eastern bazaar. The pager and walkie-talkie attack last week was surely an acceleration of the payment schedule, taking out many of Hezbollah's most capable operatives, damaging their ability to coordinate and throwing them off balance. On Friday, the strike on Ibrahim Akil and his Radwan force henchmen marked another big payment due, as Akil was one of the most wanted men in the world. The very next day and into today, the Air Force continues its systematically crush Hezbollah's firing arrays. The IDF has actually developed a model of assault from the launch arrays. As soon as the intelligence detects preparations for launches towards Israel, the IDF carries out two operations at the same time. It prepares the home front to defend, and at the same time carries out a hunt for launchers. So far, the IDF has destroyed hundreds of launchers in Lebanon, along with massive quantities of rocket ammunition. Nasrallah and his patrons in Iran see these things and understand that Israel is determined to neutralize Hezbollah once and for all. This is causing serious alarm in Beirut and Tehran. The decision about how far to take this is currently in the hands of the Israeli political echelon. As soon as an order is given, the IDF will act with unbridled power in order to dismantle Hezbollah's capabilities. Amidst all this activity, Iran understands very well that it is in trouble, as losing Hezbollah would be a devastating blow to their regional agenda. At this time, they are attempting to build a new strategy, although Hezbollah is continuing to attack Israel. But it can be assessed that their attacks will be less effective, as most of the men who Nasrallah depends on for advice, assistance, and to carry out his instructions are no longer available. Many have been eliminated, and many others are unable to communicate with him or each other. And meanwhile, other regional actors have signaled their growing impatience with the ongoing crisis that Iran and Hezbollah insist on prolonging. At the end of last week, for instance, Egypt announced that it is losing $600 million a month due to the attacks on shipping through the Red Sea by the Houthis in Yemen. This adds up to a total of $6 billion in total over the past year alone. Other countries in the region are also hurting from an almost total collapse of tourism and other revenue streams due to the ongoing conflict. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thanks, Mati. And guys, please keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. I must conclude this report by telling you about several suspicious aerial targets making their way towards Israel from the direction of Iraq. These targets were successfully intercepted outside Israeli airspace, and there were no casualties reported. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you updates and reports as the situation unfolds. But we are fighting for our lives on several fronts, and we need your help. So please pray for us. Pray for the peace of the IDF soldiers. Pray for the peace and for the speedy return of the hostages that are kept in Gaza. Continue to pray for the peace of Israel, and the most important thing that you can do is unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem. We serve a mighty God, and He will win this war.